I was saying it's 18 months since I was last here, and a hell of a lot has happened in the last 18 months.
It wasn't Nigel Farage's first campaigning lunch in Monaco. He was the guest of MonacoLive.net 18 months ago, but since then the fortunes of his upstart anti-establishment Ukip party have flourished, and support amongst British expat emigres in the south of France and Monaco is on the march.
Welcome back to Monaco. What brought you here?
I've got a lot of friends here, people I worked with in London 25, 30 years ago, but also there's a lot of people here, English people, British people here, who employ a lot of people back in the UK, so it's a chance to have a conversation with that business community, but also there is a much bigger question. Obviously Monaco and its relationship with France, and the fact that France is in the Eurozone, and there is a problem that no one's talking about. We all think of Europe being divided north to south. Right. The southern countries in real trouble in the Euro, the northern countries being okay. And I think over the course of the last 18 months, France, geographically, has slipped slightly further south. Because there is now a gap opening up between the French and German economies. I think the elections the other week, for the Front National to have done as well as they did in those elections, despite some of the appalling things that Marine Le Pen's father said, shows you there is a real serious political question here. I think that to see the UMP rudderless and in meltdown, a socialist president who's got the worst popularity ratings ever in the history of modern French politics, says something fundamental is going on here. And I'll predict that within the next 4 to 5 years, in France, the movement to leave the euro will gain a huge amount of traction.
You mentioned a couple of your supporters and friends here who employ people in Britain. They are here enjoying immense tax benefits. How do you see the tax avoidance problem?
Well, I mean, look, if it wasn't Monaco, it'd be somewhere else. And you will always have competition globally in terms of tax. I grew up in the 1970s when top rate income tax in Britain was 83%. We got it down to 40% in the 1980s. We've, in the intervening time, been back up to 50. I've nothing against people coming to live in Monaco, that's fine, but I would like to have tax competition in Britain that perhaps made it a bit less attractive for some of our people to leave. However, what I can't do is change the weather, and the sunshine will always be attractive here.
I must say you're very liked here by the expats. Probably because you evoke in them the idea of nostalgia for the Britain that once was. Could that be true?
Well, the Britain that once was stood for values, believed in itself, had a very strong Christian culture without being a religious state, and for 800 years had something called Magna Carta, which meant we actually had the best relationship in the world where the state and the judiciary could not unfairly imprison us. We had a fair deal. And something to be very proud of. And sometimes people say, oh, well, Nigel, isn't that all a bit old-fashioned? Do you know something? Good ideas, good principles are never old-fashioned.
But the world is changing drastically everywhere. How do you compete on that scale?
Yes, the world is changing drastically, all of which goes to show that the idea that Europe and a European club is the future completely misunderstands the massive shift from west to east that is taking place, both in terms of economics and also in terms of politics. Look, I want the United Kingdom to be outside a European political construct that is now 50 years out of date. We are now the progressives in this argument.
What will happen to expats living all around European Union states?
Nothing. Nothing. Why should it? You don't need to be in a political union run by a European Commission to be able to go and retire to Spain or to move to Monaco. People will still be able to do that. What we're not going to have is the total open-door free movement of people. And this was never an issue until 10 former communist countries joined the European Union. The Romanian minimum wage is only 10% of what the British minimum wage is. It's no surprise that people move in vast numbers.
I know, but if there were no jobs, they would not come, would they?
Well, the British economy, mercifully, outside the Eurozone is doing much better than many other European countries. But actually what happens is you get job displacement and you get a move to the bottom in terms of what people earn. So the minimum wage in Britain has now, for millions of people, become the maximum wage. Look, any government controls monetary policy, controls fiscal policy, and controlling the employment market is something else that government ought to be able to do. We've surrendered that responsibility, but in no way am I an isolationist. I mean, I'm married to a European. My kids are bilingual. I want us to have reasonable movement. I want us to have the ability to work in other countries. But the idea that you can come from Romania, bring your 4 kids with you.
Do you really think that this is the major economic issue of Britain?
No, I think what is really interesting is there's a guy called Sir Bob Worcester. He was the founder of Mori. He's been the leading pollster in Britain for nearly half a century. He said for the first time ever, money is not the key motivation of people voting. Community is what matters. The shape of community, the cohesion of community, the ability of people to speak to each other in the same language. That is what British politics is now all about.
So what will happen, Mr. Farage? Will Britain pull out?
Oh yes. I mean, I think that the Ukip effect, it's almost been like an explosion under British politics. All the parties are now tacking in our direction, using the kind of language that we use. A referendum is getting ever closer. I think Britain will change its relationship with Europe to being one of trade, cooperation, friendship, reciprocity, and all of those things. And when we do it, much of the rest of Europe will want to do the same thing.
And where will you be when this happens?
Retired, out of politics, back to business.
Not possible in your case, I believe.
Well, don't forget, I was in business for 20 years before doing this. Politics is not my whole life, but I have a mission. I have a mission. I want to get back the independent, self-governing birthright that as a British person I should have, and I'm going to get it.
Whatever your politics, UKIP leader Nigel Farage is winning the charm offensive. His bangers and mash, fish and chips, straight talking style has won him fans and made him enemies. But what about the rural vote and the biggest hot potato in the land, the fox hunting debate?
The fox hunting vote was one of the most illiberal things that we've seen really in modern Britain, where an ignorant majority, I say ignorant in a nice sense, not understanding the whole purpose of the minority, got their way. Now, it happened. We faced the last election, and the Countryside Alliance in this country backed Cameron, who made a big promise. Vote for me, and I'll give you a free vote in the House of Commons to overturn the fox hunting ban. And what has Cameron done in the last 5 years? Nothing. It was a promise he never intended to keep, and that I think is very bad and very wrong. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why there's an increasing amount of the rural community and the field sports people who are now voting UKIP because they've lost their faith in Cameron. Big problem is this. What do we do now?
Nigel is one political force of nature, and so is Vote OK, a pro-hunting political organisation that can mobilise up to 25,000 canvassers at a general election and claims it made the difference in 36 marginal seats for David Cameron in 2010.
I don't know what Vote OK are going to do. Whether they will stick to their normal tribal roots with a blue rosette, or whether they'll give me a chance. I'm opposed to this legislation. I want people to have the freedom to do as they wish. Quite honestly, whether you want to hunt foxes or the back room of the local pub lets you smoke a cigarette should be your decision and not government. And my record on this is better than David Cameron's.
Nigel is talking at the greatest annual display of the countryside en masse, the CLA Game Fair held in 2014 at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire. Nearly 150,000 people came to the show, more than the 120,000 who went to the Glastonbury Festival. Nigel didn't get the same size crowd as Dolly Parton, but they lapped him up at the on-site lecture theatre as he let the great and the good know just what he'd do if he had a sniff of power.
If Leicestershire triggers a referendum within Leicestershire by getting enough signatures and has a vote, they can get fox hunting back in Leicestershire. That is the only future hunting has in Britain. We are not, in the foreseeable future, going to have a House of Commons that overturns this act. But what we can do is get derogations on a county-by-county basis, and that's what I'm going to fight for.
Farage was followed around like a pop star. We will give you one of those in a minute, but the next most photographed personality at the show wasn't our very own Andy Crow, but the new Crow family pooch, Bonnie the pug.
Couldn't find a babysitter for my son's new pug, so we've had to drag it around. The annoying thing is, it's had more attention than I've had, so we won't be bringing it again. Everyone's been talking to the missus about the dog and not talking to me about pigeon shooting, but it's like, hey ho, that's life.
Will Bonnie retrieve pigeons? Yes, well, watch this space. Now, the weather. Talk about freaky Friday followed by silly Saturday and steaming Sunday. It didn't know what it was doing. It certainly got His Grace a bit flustered as we were all mucking around in his garden. So what do you think about having all these ghastly people walking around your park?
Well, I don't think they're ghastly at all. No, I'm very much a countryman myself, and I think these people fit into the area very nicely. There's everything here for not only country people, but for town people as well, and I hope they have a wonderful day, and I hope tomorrow's forecast is inaccurate, which it often is, because they're forecasting a lot of rain, and the last thing I want to see is my park turned into a bit of a mud pie here tomorrow.
From one country landowner to another, JB wants a boy band JLS. He's in the show to promote the Prince's Countryside Fund and himself owns a slice of the Garden of England.
Yeah, I live in the countryside, if I can call it that. I live in Kent, so and I have a farm there. It's a small holding, but it's still my little footprint in the countryside, and I totally can identify and get behind what the PCF are doing and what the CLA Game Fair represents in the local community. And I think it's a nice day for people to get out and explore the countryside, to walk, to see all of the shops and the stalls that have been set out. And I think a lot of work has gone into today as well.
What's your favourite animal? You've got loads of pigs or chickens. What's the favourite one?
My favourite part of being on the farm is probably hanging out with our pig Ginger. She's our first ever animal on the farm, and she's very, very dearly loved.
She's going to be Ginger Sausages at some point.
She's not Ginger Sausages because we rescued her from the RSPCA, so she's a permanent addition.
Nice idea, rescuing a pig from the RSPCA. Anyway, just in case JB changes his mind, we can put him in touch with a man who will do Ginger justice.
The ingredients we had today were unknown until 50 minutes before cooking. I wasn't overly confident with what I was given, but got this far and I was going to do my best. And I was up against an extremely competent head chef from Berkshire. So, as an arable farmer, the underdog, I would say.
So, Blenheim was Bonnie, Bonnie was beautiful, and the legs weren't bad either. Nigel's on the march and the pop stars are living the dream. All is well with the world. Just leave you with one thought. This is what the Game Fair ground looks like at the height of the action. And this is what Glastonbury is like after the party. Just remind me, who are the environmentalists?